Hello everyone, this is Blair Space here, and today this is going to be a very different kind of video than usual. I'm going to be doing my own spin on the tier list for Kaiju Universe. What Kaijus are, best and what are not so great, to put it kindly. The original idea was from Nerdiest Mementos. He did it first. I'll provide a link to his most recent and updated tier list in the description of this video. And I think I'll probably make a pinned comment as well. Yeah. So you'll have options to click to that. I was there too. We both discussed our own opinions. I will say mine will have some similarities, but also some major differences than Nerdiest's video. Just fair heads up. But anyway, let's get this on the roll. First up, we're going to go from bottom to top. Pretty simple. First up, Manila. Literally the worst kaiju in the entire game. Where do I start? Okay. Mediocre DPS. Super slow on land. Super slow in the water. Even now, there's a glitch where you can't swim. But, your base swim speed is 70. So don't think that water is a good escape option for you. Even if you have max speed, you'll get out-swam by most kaiju. So let's see. And just literally has the worst amount of health in the game. He has the same amount as Shin Form 2. Shin Form 2. Except he lacks the DPS for it. I literally cannot think of any redeeming qualities for this thing. You could argue that he can go to level 200, but here's the thing, right? I already said why speed is useless on this guy, so that makes 50 of those extra levels useless. In regen, well, here's the thing, you're so weak, you're only going to be able to kill, just complete noobs. And this tier list is based off of, first of all, max level, and both being skilled players. So if you're a skilled player, and you're max level Manila, we can't even say it is good for killing noobs argument. But basically, regen is useless, because you won't kill anyone fast enough, you're just going to get ranged to death, or just completely obliterated off the face of the earth. And you could argue, it helps you heal outside of combat, but odds are you're not going to be able to escape from a fight that often, so you're not going to get the chance to heal. No redeeming qualities, absolute hot garbage. End of story. Now, a slight upgrade from Manoa, Gojira. A little bit more health, still pretty bad, 2600 health, which is, it's not terrible, but still pretty bad. DPS is still mediocre, but is slightly higher than Manila's, and Gojira has the option to swim to the water. Fastest swim speed in the game. Apart from that, he's still pretty hot garbage. The only redeeming, I would say, the only thing you have is you're better than Manila. A level 50 Gojira can beat a level 100 to 200 Manila with, roughly 100 or so health remaining. So if you put extra health, you're definitely going to beat a max level Manila. Just, that's how bad Manila is. End of story. Next up is Shin Form 2. In my opinion, he's just a better Gojira. Now, he shares the worst amount of health in the game with Manila, but he's still slow on land, but not nearly as slow as these two on land. He's slightly faster. He also has second fastest swim speed in the game, which is still really good. But his DPS, just spam 1 and just boom, 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 hit, hit, hit. You will pump out loads of damage. He's just good. Well, he's not good, but compared to these two, he's done much better. He's done a lot more justice. Next up in D tier, he's being a bit wonky, is Mother Longlegs. Now, she's kind of in the same boat as Shin Form 2, but she succeeds a bit more. Very crappy health, and pretty high DPS. Her swimming speed is average, so I can't really mark that as an advantage, but she is the fastest land kaiju in the entire game. Her base running speed is 60. That is actually outstanding. You could technically escape just about anything apart from Kumunga, which is second fastest land kaiju, and maybe flyers, but That's pretty groundbreaking. And to top it off, I will say 2 of her hits have pretty bad hitboxes, but spinning slashes has ranging potential combined with her speed. So basically, the difference between her and Shin Form 2 is she's faster on land and she can, range she has range potential. That's about it. She's also good for grinding on buildings, but this is a PvP thing, so that's just not going to count. Next up is Zombie Gigan. Okay, bottom of C tier. Where do I start? He has fast land speed, pretty solid. A mediocre beam. His melee DPS is also mediocre, but better than, these two down here. But the issue is its hitboxes. You cannot, one of your moves cannot hit anything that's below you. So basically, your ability to combo smaller targets is basically useless. And because of your lack of health, most of the larger kaiju have way more health. So odds are you're not going to kill larger kaiju. Infection. The chances are so low. If you try to rely on infection in combat to weaken your opponent, it's just a waste of time. It's just a literal waste of time. You have a mechanic here, but you can't rely on it. It's like, if it works, and cool, it worked, but it's just dumb. And to top it off, your swim speed is god-awful. It's literally the worst swim speed. Yeah, no, it's worse than Manila's swim speed. The only thing is, you have a beam, you're very fast on land, you have more DPS than this disappointment down here. That's why you don't use this tier. So, I guess that's something. Next, Gojira. To be honest, I'd say people underestimate this guy. He has, for a kaiju you have for free, he has pretty decent melee. Small health, but that's a given for 2 out of the 3 starters. And he has a beam. He's very slow on land, but he's small, and he also, he has the average swimming speed. So in the water, you can have good escape options because you're small size. And your beam isn't terrible, but at the same time, it's not great. The reason I put him above Zombie Gigan is I do believe his overall melee DPS is higher. In my opinion, he has a higher melee DPS. That, and he can use his beam a little bit more often. His beam's weaker than Zombie Gigan's, but he can use it more often, which overall just gives it better DPS. Simple enough. Next up is Shin Form 3. In my opinion, I'd say, low health, 2300 health, compared to this guy, compared to Gojira, who has 2200 health, is not a big upgrade. And your melee combat is actually worse than both of these guys, I believe. But, you do have one redeeming quality, and that's your blood spam. Now, to give you an idea, you can use 2 blood spams in the amount of time Gojira can use his atomic breath, and I believe roughly 3 times the amount of time Zombie Gigan uses his beam. Zombie Gigan, beam does 2500 DPS. Gojira, 1600. You, 900. The fact that you can use it more often just means your overall ranging DPS is better than these two. So, generally speaking, you could probably beat these two in a fight. You're better than them, but not by an insane amount. You just have a slight advantage. Next up in C tier, and this is a huge jump in power, in my opinion, from Shin Form 2, which just makes it more dumb. The one starter that is just... Why? Let me just list some... He has decent land speed, really good melee DPS, and 3500 health base. A starter with 3300 base health. Why? It's great that he's not complete garbage, but in my opinion, Shin Form 2 is a little bit underpowered. Gojira, just the right spot, and Anguirus just way too strong for a starter. I understand, okay, this guy is meant to be the best of all worlds, glass cannon, and tank. But Anguirus has too much health combined with the melee DPS he has. The things that keep him in C tier is the fact that he's not the best at ranging. He's not terrible either. He has mediocre, range, but he can be ranged out by just superior rangers. And beams can really screw him over, and flyers. Flyers will eat you alive. Yeah, I think that's just about it. Just plus 3,300 base health is good for a starter, but I will say compared to like other stuff up here, it's not spectacular. Now the green turd himself, Godzilla Jr, slightly above Anguirus. 2,600 base health. Slow on land, but small and agile in the water, so you can really you have good escape options. I will say, compared to earlier, beforehand, Godzilla Jr. was like high B tier if this was before his recent nerf, like 2 or so weeks ago. But the reason I put him above Anguirus is simply because of the fact that, although he has less health, he still is like good melee, like compared to Anguirus, and he has a beam. I will say the beam, although much weaker, still does 1,200 damage for every usage. So you could, in theory, range out an Anguirus. Like, he'll be able to rush you, but by the time he gets to you, I feel like you should have enough of a health advantage by then. So you should be able to beat him. Next up is the arguably the worst out of the... No, he straight up is the worst out of the two... The worst event kaiju, period, in my opinion. Both statistically and just on paper. Wendigo Crawler. In order to have him, you have to own the Skull Island DLC. I own that DLC. Yes, I wasted money on it, but that's besides the point. Basically, I'm just going to address both Skullcrawler and Wendigo Crawler so I can compare them. That's not where you belong, buddy. Skullcrawler just decimates Junior. He decimates everyone in C tier and below because you have fast land speed, like not like the fastest, but you're pretty damn fast. You can outpace most other kaiju. You have a super jump, which is like 4 times higher than the average jump. Combine this with your pretty good speed, makes you very agile. And with max damage and max regen, you can pump out best melee damage in the game. Like, I know I said, you know how I said Shin Form 2 is a better Gojira? Well, Skullcrawler is basically Shin Form 2 on fucking crack. In terms of, spam. 2,600 health on top of this. Not great, but compared to, these two, just insane. He's great. He does great melee damage. Downsides are flyers, which, considering that, and I mean every flyer. That's also why Anguirus is down here, but every flyer in the game counters you, because you can't spam on them, because they'll just do hit and run, which mitigates so much of your damage. That and just, you have no beam. And you can also get ranged out by kaiju that have tail whips, looking at you, Heisei. And you're good, but you're not great. He's borderlining into B tier, but just not enough. Just barely not enough. Next up, bottom of B tier, female Muto. I would say, overall, less deep melee DPS than Skullcrawler, but still, your melee DPS is great. That and you have much more health, and you're still fairly fast for a land kaiju. However, they suffer from the same thing that Skullcrawler... I didn't even address Wendigo, I'm sorry. Wendigo, I'm just going to keep it short, because I already made a video on this, but first of all, no super jump. Second of all, technically you can pump out the same amount of DPS as Skullcrawler, but the move that you have to use to do it has a smaller hitbox, making it harder to hit, and for every hit you miss when you're spamming melee is detrimental. And these antlers right here, collision, which can get you stuck on stuff. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Yeah, it's not raw stats, it's just the way it's designed and all that. That makes it worse than Skullcrawler. Anyway, back to female Muto. She suffers from what Skullcrawler, Wendigo, and Anguirus suffer from. And that's just literally every flyer in the entire game. Sure, you're fast, you have good land, you have good melee DPS, and you have pretty decent health. I believe it's just barely 4,200, a little bit less. Between 4,100 and 4,200 HP. That's pretty good. But flyers can range the ever-loving crap out of you, and just beams can be torment. And yes, you do have shockwave smash, but it's very short term. It's a very small, pulse. Like, you'll maybe defend yourself against, like, 2 or 3 ticks of damage. And when you have Kaiju that can do, like, hundreds and hundreds of damage with their beams, that's not really that great. It's a very... Especially against flyers that have beams that can just torment you. It's a good, you can use the Shockwave Smash against flyers to, like, defend yourself and maybe get to water. I don't approve of running away, but if it's, like, against a flyer that's using beams on you, okay, that's understandable, because you literally can't do nothing against that unless they, they're dumb, but in a skill versus skill scenario, you would die. Next up is Kumunga. Alright, let's see here. I would say he's similar to female Muto in terms of issues, but he handles them much better. And I mean much better. Health is 2,700, and melee is, although great, I would say overall, because, in raw numbers, it's a little bit less than female Muto, but only by a small amount, because you can spam your melee. The difference, however, is, one, he's the second fastest land kaiju, Kumunga. 50 base sprint speed. That's reason number one. So, although you can't really exactly outpace a flyer, well, you at least have, you're going to make it difficult for them. You're at least going to make their life a lot more difficult. And to top this off, web spam. I don't need to say anymore. That's it. It's weak damage, but it's spammable weak damage. Female Muto is purely defensive when dealing with, beam spamming flying kaiju, or just rangers in general. Kumunga at least has an offensive defense and high speed, so you can dodge attacks and use your web spam to try and scare off flyers. That's... That, and you have, 95 swim speed. It's not, it's not the fastest, but is above the average swim speed, which is 90. So, you have that going for you. He's really hard to level up, but as you go up the levels, max damage and max regen, and he is actually really good. Not top this off, he's the best at 1v1ing ground kaiju. It doesn't matter if you're an S tier. If you're a ground kaiju, Kumunga can mess you up. Just because of web spam. He can deny you the ability to regen and all that. His weakness, though, is lack of health and flyers. Sure, he can defend against flyers better, but flyers are still his bane. The bane to his existence. And that's an entire faction of characters. Next up, Showa. In my opinion, the worst flyer. I'm going to just address this now. The dorsal plate charge glitch is gone, so we can't say he can just Thanos snap stuff off the map. That argument is invalid. But he has the slowest flying speed of any kaiju. Out of all the flying kaiju, 70. Which, compared to ground kaiju, that's great. But what really is the nail in the coffin here is the fact that, you can only use one of your attacks while flying. That and the way you're designed, you're curved like a shrimp. Usually most flyers can range outwards or downwards because of the way, their attacks stretch outward. Showa, because you're curved and your punch hitbox is small, you have to... It's risky. It's really hard to range people at all. Against other flyers, they're going to be able to range you, even if you're small. However, you can swim, but it's another case of you only have one attack while swimming. Which, considering that his other two melees are dorsal plate charge and dropkick, it does make sense. From a balance perspective, it does, kind of kick him in the... Yeah. Plus, his punch is 480 damage, but every 3 seconds, which on paper is not good it's bad compared to lots of other stuff. And there's also the fact that, sure, you can swim, but you can't fully utilize that, because you can't really do combat very effectively in the water either. And personally, I prefer the ability to be able to fly fast than swim fast, because you can swim through water quick, but on land, well, good luck. Flying, you can go over land and water. But yeah. That's enough of that. Next up is male Muto. Basically, although he lacks a beam, don't underestimate his damage, because 2 of his melees, they repeat them, like they go twice. I believe it's the weaker one. It's just the standard strike and the other attack that's like exactly like it. So just double that damage. And although I will say against other flyers he's not the best, he is really good at bullying ground kaiju because his strike attack goes downwards, like significantly. So combine that double hit with the ability to range ground kaiju, he's pretty effective. That, and he is some kind of slow for a flying kaiju, but not that bad. And he can actually swim and use combat effectively in the water, unlike Showa. Just overall, he's like a better Showa, in my personal opinion, overall. Like, he lacks a beam, but, you know. Next up is, oh, come on, grab it. Kamadoff Koon. Now, some people would say he's much stronger, but I do have my reasons. I'm going to address his strengths first, because he does have a fair... He's literally what you would think. Shin Form 2's ability to spam attacks out the ass, but the ability to fly. He's comparable to male Muto with the fact that you can swim and fly. However, he can also spam beams. His beam does good burst damage, and it has a very short cooldown. And to top it off, he has a pulse attack that can defend himself against beams. It's not the most effective, but it is a little bit better. However, he has 2 drawbacks. Now, the drawbacks, if he only had 1 per, thing, it wouldn't be bad. But these 2 drawbacks combined is what really keeps him where he is. First of all, he shares the worst health value in the game with normal Shin Form 2 and Manila. 1,700 health. Okay. And his flying speed is 80, which makes him the 3rd slowest kaiju in the game. And as you know, if you hit 25% or health or below, you get a 25% speed debuff, I believe, or something like that. So, because you don't have that much health, it's not going to take much damage for you to get a debuff when you're already frail. So you can do... He's literally just a flying glass cannon. It doesn't take much damage to slow him down and then get him screwed. That, and unlike normal Shin Form 2, he has an average swim speed of 90. Not bad, but a combination of just having terrible health and being very slow for, your size, it's just a GG. Next is the Chad himself, 2014. Where do I begin? Now, in raw stats, he's actually fairly decent. His claw does 600 damage, and his bite does 670. Now, claw hitbox is hot garbage. You need to hug someone to do it, to, use it. However, and you have less, 4,300 health, sorry, which is decent. It's not bad. That, and, you have an average swim speed. However, what makes him this high in the list? Like, some people are like, oh, bottom. But I would say he's 3rd best in B tier for a reason. The bite hitbox range. And if you saw my most recent video before this, the bite hitbox range is outstanding. It covers your entire body. Not only does it make it a good defense against flyers, but it also makes it good for ranging other ground kaiju. Like, you can bully stuff like Scroll Crawler, anything really. You can bully a lot of targets. Like, I will say, you can quote-unquote get ranged in close, close melee. Like, that's how bad claw hitbox is. Like, for example, if your opponent gets close to you, but not too close, sure, you can still land your bite, but you won't be able to land claw. And overall, they'll just outdamage you, essentially. But what's great is you can also spam Atomic Breath like no tomorrow. Like, his Atomic Breath can be spammed. And to top it off, he's actually, in a way, if you ask me, a Heisei and Burning counter. Because his cone is amazing. The Atomic Breath is like a perfect cone. And because you can spam it, it's like using a flamethrower versus like a fire hydrant hose. You can just douse them out. As long as you have good aim, you can douse them out. Like, if you saw my video, you saw it. I was able to just completely disable a Heisei's ability to spiral. Almost, at least most of it. he's great. Just lack of like raw stats compared to other higher tier kaiju, not that great. That and the claw hitbox makes it so comboing is really hard. Like, which means that although you can do long range, melee range, close range combat, you can technically get range, which is kind of ironic, given ranging is all about hitting them, but staying as far away from getting hit as possible. It's weird, but apart from that, I'd say he's really solid. Okay. Next up is both of the Rodans, actually. Well, out of the three. Both Heisei and Titanus Rodan. Both are pretty good for ranging. However, I will say that Heisei Rodan is the far superior at ranging. Just the wing hitbox is great. They both share the second highest speed in the game, 105 flight speed, which is outstanding. And, brain fart. Heisei Rodan has less health and significantly less damage. But, like I said, he's a little bit smaller, and has better that's not what I meant to do. And he has better hitboxes. Just, better attack hitboxes, which means he's better at dodging. Meanwhile, Titanus Rodan, although bigger, has a little bit more health and a lot more raw power. Like, in my opinion, they balance out and they're pretty even. They're both good options. Both the second best of B tier. Now, the best of B tier is Titanus, 2019. In my opinion, okay, he does have some shortcomings, but for example, he doesn't have an outstanding hitbox like 2014, but both of his hitboxes are good. None of them are bad, none of them are outstanding, but both of them are good. So, like, for example, plus he has more raw power. He has more health, more raw damage, for both beam and melee. So, in a close range melee fight, he could, as long as he stays close but not too close, you could mess up a 2014. That and you're a little bit faster on land than in 2014, so you could rush them. Against these two, you could use your bite as a defense as long as you know how to position yourself and use control shift properly. And although it sucks that you have to deal with such a long cooldown after using Atomic Breath, your Atomic Breath fires out instantly, and its damage is actually pretty good. I'm not going to sleep on that. That's pretty good damage. So, you earned your spot at the top of B tier. You're pretty balanced. Now, Titanus Mogura, worst of A tier, but not bad by any stretch. 3,700 health, pretty good. Flight speed is 90, which is not bad either. That's actually pretty decent. However, what really makes her good is, first of all, her melee, she can combine both her melees and do 1,000 damage at a time for every, dive bombing she does. And even if she doesn't do that, her combos are very fast. Like, you can pump out damage. The only downside is her melee hitboxes are pretty, they're kind of iffy. Like, her melee hitboxes aren't bad per se, but they're really awkward and clunky in my opinion. In my opinion, they should be made a little bit bigger so they're more consistent, but not too much bigger. That's just about me, though. And her flashbang. That's probably the best part. I think you can blind someone from 6 to 8 seconds, but it has a 45-second cooldown. This can be used for both giving yourself an advantage when dive bombing a ground target, or making it a good escape option against other flyers, or just period. And if you're feeling really reckless, I guess you could use it as a defense against beams. I wouldn't use it. Don't use it as a defense against beams. That's just a bad idea, really. That's about it. Next up is Jaguar. No. Yes. Jaguar. 2,800 health. Good. His chop has good range. As long as the very tip of your fingers hit someone, you're good. Top this off, you're also very fast. I believe you're the third fastest ground kaiju, which is a pretty good feat. You're also pretty agile in the water. Another good feature. And dropkick can actually range too. I believe it's when you have to turn at the right time, and you can do a good chunk of damage while also ranging your target. And to top this off, you have a very strong, like, burst damage, like, beam. It's, like, super... And to top it off, one thing that no one mentioned is Whirlwind has 2 good purposes apart from building farming, actually. I've seen it. Not many people... Like, nobody really mentioned this, but I'm pretty sure with Whirlwind Spin, you can defend yourself against beams, I think. If I'm wrong, well, it's not going to change its spot, because there's another good purpose for that. If a flying kaiju is, like, just above you, you can hit them with Whirlwind Spin. So, you know, you have good options. Very good kaiju. Final Wars. In my opinion, he's the middleman. Like, he loses to Titanus in melee. Like, out of the 4 big Gojiras, or, you know, the main group of the game, he's second. Let me think here. He can outrange Titanus, but Titanus can brute force him. He can technically brute force Heisei, but Heisei can range him. And, well, okay, Shin just outright ranges him and brute forces him, but he's very balanced melee-wise. He's very consistent. He has very good hitboxes that are both good, but not broken. Fairly cheap, like, you know, charge cost for melees. They're not terrible. I think they're like 15 each, or at least one of them is 15. I have not played them in a long time. I will apologize, but... Top this off, you can use your Atomic Breath fairly often. You also have... Actually, you have really good sprint speed. I think you're one of the faster Gojiras in the game, in terms of strictly being a ground kaiju. Top this off, you're actually the fastest swimming, like, Gojira. 100 base swim speed. That's impressive. Like, that's an advantage you have. You know, as I was saying earlier, moderately strong Atomic Breath. Spiral Ray, though, sure, it has a long cooldown, but it pumps out nasty damage. If you use it at the right time, it's really good. Not as, you know, it's... Yeah, actually, that's about it. Plus, it actually has a wide cone. Spiral has a wide cone. So, you can use that as a defensive option against enemy beams while doing damage as well. Okay. Frostbite, in my opinion, is just a jacked up 2014 that also has a little bit of 2019 sprinkled in there. Let me explain. He has the bite hitbox of 2019, which is good, but he has his claw hitbox is the same as 2014's bite. It covers your entire body. You can range with it. Top this off, you have 6,000 base health. You have great regen. But the only downsides are your lack of speed. Like, you're slow. I believe you're the slowest Titanus out of the 4 in the game. Like, out of the 4 Titanus Gojiras. But you're a tank. So, argument is invalid there. That and you have great health regen. I might have mentioned that already. But also, one thing he does suffer from, though, is he also has the same issue in terms of beams with Titanus Gojira. You have a longish cooldown after that. If he had a cooldown similar to 2014, he'd be S tier, because that means he would be able to spam beam, which would be insane. Next up, the best of the Rodans in my personal opinion. Now, damage-wise, in melee, he's comparable to Heisei Rodan. Hitbox-wise for his attacks, he's like in the middle. Better than Titanus Rodan, but worse than Heisei. But what makes him better is that he makes the best use of their fast speed because he's the smallest Rodan. He is so small and hard to hit. Like I'm not even kidding. He's a pain in the ass to hit. Compare that with, you know, his pretty decent melee hitboxes, especially Wing Thrash. Or, yeah, Talon Thrash, Wing Thrash, whatever. It's a good combination. And to top this off, he has a beam that does like 1,400 or 1,500 damage and only costs like 10 charge in a fairly short cooldown. Only downsides are, as said, his melees are very weak in terms of raw damage. And he does have the least amount of health, you know, compared to all of the other Rodans. But apart from that, he's pretty good. Next up is Heisei Mothra, slightly higher, because she's the fastest kaiju in the game, period. 110 base flight speed. Oh my god, that is actually, it's really good. Like, okay, you don't even really need to invest that many, points in the speed, because the only things that have a chance at catching you, even for flyers, is like these three. The three Rodans. Apart from that, you probably don't need that many speed points in speed, or maybe none. So you're very flexible of how you can spend your skill points, apart from the obvious max damage. There's one. Second of all, your beam is really good. It costs like 50 charge, and it does, I believe, 1400 damage. It top it off, very short cooldown. Compare that, you're not the biggest, but you're also, you're not all that big, actually. You can be fairly evasive with her. That and her melee hitboxes are actually pretty good. Specifically, Wing Hit. Wing Hit has a pretty good melee hitbox. Not the best, but it's good for ranging. It's pretty solid, in my opinion. It's especially in dogfights, I believe. Like, she is a solid pick. The only downsides are similar to Turkey Rodin. Very 2400 health, which is actually pretty bad. And melee damage is not that great either. But because she has like slightly faster speed, slightly better melee hitboxes, and a slightly better beam overall, in my opinion, that's what puts her just barely above him. Now, in my opinion, the better version of Heisei Mothra, Batra. Not even a contest. 2700 health, not great, but an upgrade. Not the fastest, but still very quick. 95 base flight speed. And not only that, but just stronger melee and vastly superior melee hitboxes. Specifically, like barrel roll. Barrel roll is like the bane of existence towards any small flying kaiju. Like, Kamadoff Koon? Barrel roll. Argument is invalid. Turkey Rodin especially? Sorry, I have barrel roll. Your argument is invalid. Heisei Mothra? Barrel roll. Your argument is invalid. I don't think I need to say much else. Like, your beam is kind of meh, but I would say out of all the flyers, you're the best at using a beam as a defense, because you have a really good cone beam as well. Not that great damage at all, but apart from that, you're pretty set. Mecha King Ghidorah, the worst of the Ghidorahs. I'll go further in depth with this when I go over King Ghidorah, the better version of this, despite the fact that he's cheaper. But I'll just go over a briefing. I would say Mecha King Ghidorah used to be S tier. But two things happened. The first thing that happened was they swapped King Ghidorah and Mecha King Ghidorah's health values. Mecha used to have 4,500 health, and normal Ghidorah used to have 4,200 health, but they swapped them. Now, Mecha has 4,200. Okay. Top this off. The second thing, the big kicker, is the resizes. Like, don't get me wrong, the resizes, it makes them look a lot better in-game, in my opinion. But PvP-wise, it seemed to have made King Ghidorah a lot better, and Mecha King Ghidorah just significantly Because you used to be able to reliably use both melees at once for like 1200 damage at a time for a dive bombing. And because your hitboxes were better back then, you could, what you could do is you could just do that. Go above their heads, use both Onslaught and Bite, 1200 damage, and you're ranging them. But because of the resize, I'm going to address the worst one. Onslaught's hitbox is ass. You have to, it's like 2014's Claw. You have to hug someone. Like, me and Nerdius did a test. Monster Zero versus Mecha King Ghidorah. I could not use both melees at once because I went through his wing, directly into his wing, but for some reason I could not. I can only land one melee. Only one. It was complete disaster. And sure, you could still combo, but bear in mind that your charge is way more expensive compared to, like, King Ghidorah. Like, it's stupid. And you only... Let me give you an example. Okay. Bite, Mecha's Bite, only 20 extra damage. But it costs an extra 5 charge? Okay, odd. And I think, like, Onslaught is only 20 extra damage compared to, like, normal King Ghidorah's kick. And that's, again, more expensive. And a slightly longer cooldown. It doesn't make sense. The only advantage that he has in raw stats is speed, but here's the thing. Because you have less health and your attacks are way more expensive, you're kind of locked into using health and regen. And King Ghidorah, because it's way more flexible. Oh, I'll make another point here. A long time ago, King Ghidorah used to be a little bit slower than it is now, but they buffed his speed. It went from 85 to 90, which made the gap between Mecha and King Ghidorah in terms of raw speed shorter. Combine this with Mecha being very restricted in terms of builds, a King Ghidorah can just can afford to put a little bit of speed, and then that one of your two advantages is null and void. The only other advantage Mecha has is Force Field, which it's a decent move, but what your opponent can do is use Beam, like a strong attack beam, force you to use Force Field if you really need to use it, and that technically means they're forcing you to stay away from them, which gives them time to regen. I'm not saying that move is a throw, but it's not the best move. However, I'm gonna stop bashing it because he actually is still good. Still has good damage, still has good combo potential as long as you can, afford to hit. Bite can kind of range, but not really. It's hard. It's really hard. Plus, 95 speed for something that has 4,200 health is not bad. And you actually can use Beam and Melee at the same time. I will say, King Ghidorah does that, but better. But the fact that you can use your Beams and Melee at the same time, you can, in terms of dogfights, let's say you make some good distance between you and your opponent. You can Beam your target. They're going to think, okay, I can Melee rush him. But if they're slow enough and you're fast enough, basically by the time they get to you, you'll be able to use Melees while beaming them. It's like a trap. You'll force them to take both your Beam and your Melee. Because most people are just so conditioned to, oh, someone's beaming in the middle of an air fight and I'm close enough, I'll just Melee rush them. But that's not the case here. Yeah, overall, I would say he earned spot in third best of A tier. Next is Biollante, second best of A tier, in pretty good health. 4,500 health, which is really good. Really good range with her melees. Her melees themselves are not too strong. It's like 545 and 635, like raw damage, not too great, but their range is really good. And she can also spam acids, like acid spit or whatever. Acid spew, I'm sorry. You can spam Acid Spew, only costs 50 charge and has a short cooldown, does good damage. Overall, and as said, your regen is great. Like, you do like over 100, you heal over like 100 or so health per tick. And for something that has 4,500 health, that's amazing. That's really good. The only downsides are, also, your bite hitbox. You cannot dodge it if someone's touching you. It's really good against ranging flyers. Like, you want to range me as like, let's say, Heisei Rodin? I'm using Biollante. Have good luck. Titanus Rodin, good luck. It's really good against flyers. Not the best against flyers, but it's a good choice. So yeah, the only downsides are you're slow and you're very big. And usually people think, a big target, easy to hit. And odds are you're going to get dogpiled way more than you think. It's a painful... That, and you just cannot dodge attacks for the life of you. So you have good regen and good survivability, but you're forced to take damage sometimes. A lot of the time, actually. You're forced to take damage a lot. Which, in some scenarios, in cases where you're fighting certain kaiju, that's pretty bad. Yeah. That's not worrying. Top of A tier, Thermo. Again, I think I'm going to repeat it again. 2014, but even more jacked up. Okay, so your Thermo's bite does more damage than 2014's, but it still covers his entire body, including his tail. So, technically speaking, just if you're a Thermo player, use your bite as a tail whip in combat and you can range people. That and you're like pretty fast. I think you're the fastest land, you're out of all the Titanuses, I think you're the fastest. If not, then tied for fastest with, normal Titanus. But point being, you can effectively range. And your claw is not something to sleep on either. Okay? Your bite does 730, your claw does 700 still. And it's not only a good hitbox, it's better than Titanus' claw. Just slightly better. So, overall, you have the most effective combos in the game. And you have 5,500 base health, really good regen, and you're just a melee monster. Like, people best respect you in melee combat. Your downside is flyers and, rangers, like, beams, but there is a way to at least somewhat mitigate this. Just be very careful when you use your pulse. Be very careful. Just use it when you're getting beamed. Like, okay, for example, I would say against Kumunga, that's useless. Just don't even bother. Just best go to the water if a Kumunga is web spamming you, because he can just spam it so much, it's useless. But against stuff like most of the entire cast that have beams, what you can do is you can use your pulse to defend yourself to mitigate that damage. And just, be like, hey, you have no choice but to melee fight me. Good luck, buddy. I think that's the general statement. Or, for using pulse offensively, what you could do is ambush people. Don't just run up to someone blatantly and just go, big kaboom. Try to be sneaky with it, And to top it off, use 7 or so regen. That way you can regen your stamina real quick. That means you can use pulse more often and just make good use of your strong melee. Overall, really, I don't know why. I mean, I understand why people originally slept on him. Why they thought he was maybe B tier, but in my opinion, he's best of A tier. Personally, that's what I think. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, bottom of S tier. Heisei, for sure. 710 damage for a melee on a 2-second cooldown with 10 charge cost, and you can range with it. It's very effective for ranging. You also have a good pulse for defending against beamers. It's not as strong in raw powers like maybe Thermo's pulse, but you can use it more often, I would say, so that's good. A good defense option. Don't use Heisei pulse for offense, though. That is a brain-dead idea. Nerdiest Mementos literally made a video joking about that and why you shouldn't do it. So, don't do it. You can also spam your beams like no tomorrow. I think, his standard atomic breath is 1900 or... Yeah, I think it's 1900, if not then high 1800 damage, and you can spam that, which is really good. 4300 base health, which is good. Pretty decent speed on land. Average swimming speed. The only downside is... Well, okay, I will address... There is also Spiral Ray. Spiral Ray, which does 2500 damage, I believe. But... you cannot do anything afterwards for 8 seconds. Which means if you use Spiral Ray in a bad time, or just use it right at the start of the fight, you are gonna get punished hard. Like a skilled player, in a skilled player versus skilled player scenario, you will get punished hard if you misuse it bad. So Spiral can be good, just don't be stupid when using it. If you're in a 1v1, or, you need to pump out some desperate damage, I don't know. I don't use Heisei that often, but basically, try to use that for very specific scenarios. That, and I would say the other downside is flyers. Flyers are just terrifying for Heisei. A skilled fly player can just range you to death. Because he can just bonk you in the noggin. Alright, next up is Mogura. Literally best kaiju for beam DPS. Uranium Beam is a 16-second cooldown and 1400 damage, but it's super short. It's 4 ticks of damage, which is boom, 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 1400 damage almost instantly. Same thing for Bullet Blast, but it does 800 damage instead. That's a beam combo of 2200 damage. That, and you have an average flight speed, 90. That's not bad. You also have average health, 3700. To be honest, it's really what's carrying you here is your beam spam. That's literally carrying you, because you also have your fair share of downsides. Slowest swimmer of the game, like 45 swim speed when most flyers have 50. You're slower than the other flyers, too. That and your melee hitbox is not too hot looking. And combine that with the fact that you're very chunky, basically, literally every fast flyer that's good at using, like, melee combat, like Heisei Rodin, Titanus Rodin, Mecha King Ghidorah, Batra, Mothra maybe, Turkey Rodin, maybe even Mogura. I would say arguably Mogura too. They can melee rush you if you're not careful, and if you get caught in a melee rush and you start to get hit with melees, you're going to struggle because your platinum kick is kind of iffy. That's about it. Next up, Gigan. Basically, in my opinion, a better Mogura. Now, hear me out, alright? Now, okay, so 1100 less health at base. Okay, that's not looking too great. And you only have one beam, but that beam is also much stronger than... It's a little bit stronger than Mogura's uranium beam, but it's only one beam. But, hear me out. 82 base flight speed, which is barely anything compared to Mogura. It's barely a difference. You might as well be the same flight speed, in my opinion. It's not going to matter. The real kicker is, though, not only is Gigan much smaller and nimble, but his melee hitboxes are 10 times better and 10 times more effective in terms of damage. He's literally just combine a little bit of Mogura and then combine it with like a very swift and agile melee rusher that can range you. The only downside is like lack of health and low speed for its weight class, and just avoid buildings. I would also like to point out that Mogura has to use, since they do have more beams, but in an aerial fight, using your beams more often means stopping more often. More times you stop, the more like vulnerable you are to getting melee rushed. And because you have to rely on very expensive beams more often, it really restricts you on what your builds can be. You need a lot of charge. Like, you need mostly charge with damage. Gigan is a lot more flexible in that matter. Max speed or max regen, and you both work for Gigan. They both suit different playstyles. And the cherry on top for Gigan, though, best destroy counter in the game. Like, brain-dead destroyer players cannot do anything against a competent Gigan player if they know how to counter it. Nerdy's Mementos makes a very good example of that, so props to him for, showing us. Now, next up is Monster Zero, just the tank of the flyers, and just a monster. Ironic, I said, because everything is a monster, but hear me out. 6,100 health. Okay, that's already looking good. 80 base flight speed. That's understandable, because you're a tank for a flyer. Bite, which does 640 damage. Not bad. And Slam, which does 755 damage. Now, your gravity... Okay, Monster Zero's gravity beams are kind of poop. I'm not gonna lie. But you don't need them. Here's why. Your bite hitbox is ludicrous. You can literally... What makes you so amazing is that you can range, and you have an insane amount of health. So even if you fail to range on accident, you have so much health, it's like, whatever, I'll just keep attacking. That, and you're also very flexible in terms of builds, just like Gigan. Both max speed Monster Zero and max regen Monster Zero, best builds. They are the best builds, and they're very flexible for different situations. And plus, the bite hitbox, as I said, is really good against Gigan, literally every flyer. Like, every flyer. Like, nearly every flyer. Down here. He is, like, ironically, the counter to most flyers. The reason you see Monster Zero looking like complete idiots on servers is, well, they're being idiots. We're talking, however, max level, skilled player versus skilled player scenario. And that's, yeah. Monster Zero, when in the hands of a skilled player, is lethal. Next up, the best of the Ghidorahs, King Ghidorah. I made a pretty valid point. I made some hints towards why when mentioning Mecha King Ghidorah, but I'll go over them. 4,500 health, 90 base flight speed, very fast melee combos. His melee combos are cheaper than Mecha's by an insane amount. And top this off, they're good range too. Bite has good range, and your kick. Oh my god! If you know how to range with like King Ghidorah's kick, a ground kaiju, apart from maybe like very few exceptions, can just cry about it. That's all they can do. They can cry about it. Not only that, but you can also, as said, I mentioned it with Mecha, you can you can melee and beam combo. You can basically do the bait people into doing that. But King Ghidorah does it better for two reasons. First of all, although their beams do the same amount of damage, King Ghidorah's is like has a shorter cooldown by like 3 or 4 seconds. That automatically makes it more efficient overall. And top it off, the cooldown is the melee cooldown when using, beams is significantly better too. Well, for example, Mecha, you can only use like 2 melees when using beam. King Ghidorah, and you have to wait longer too. King Ghidorah, meanwhile, doesn't have to wait as long until he can use melees while beaming, and he can use up to 3. That's so much better. That is significantly better. Like, your DPS is amazing, your health is good, your speed is good, range is amazing, and just beam and melee combo is just not only like a good baiting strategy against other flyers, it's just lethal. Like, another thing with the baiting thing with the beam, it's you're either forcing them to take beam damage, run away, or they're going to fall for the bait. Like, you can beat Monster Zero just because he's that good. Granted, I would say it's not like King Ghidorah dumpsters Monster Zero, because Monster Zero is good, but like, he is the better of the two and the best Ghidorah in the game. Okay, alright, here we go. Volcanic Violente. Now, originally, I will say, if there wasn't for the change like a week or two ago, he would have been top of S tier, but he's not. Or he, she, whatever gender Volcanic Bio is, since it's not original, technically speaking. Same health as Titanus, like nearly 5,000 health. Best regen in the game in like raw numbers, like better than Bios, which says a lot. Top this off, you have Volcanic Spew, does 1,800 damage, and you can use it on short cooldown, just like Acid Spew, but for Bio. But it's just better. More damage. Just significantly more damage. And your melees, they hit like a truck. Volcanic Bio's Bite, 690 damage. Searing Spears does 770 damage. Like, they're both insane. The reasons he's not top of S tier, though, is the Lava Spew nerf, which it did like 2,000 before, or 2,000, which does add up over time. But to top it off, Searing Spear's hitbox, I wouldn't say it was just downright nerf, but for me it just feels off now. Like, I feel like it was slightly nerfed, because for me it's a little bit harder to land, but it's still a great hitbox. Overall, still an amazing kaiju, and just... I would say it's just a great kaiju. I don't know what else to say. It's great. And another great kaiju, Shin Godzilla. What a freaking powerhouse. Let's just start off with the obvious here. Back beams plus tail whip. Back beams does 1,250 damage, and tail whip does 810. Combine that, and that's like, in a melee fight, that's an instant 2,060 damage on your opponent if they take that. And at the very least, if that doesn't hit them, then they'll scare them off. And the thing is, Shin also has insane regen. Like, he is has one of the best regen, like, not as good as Biollante or a Volcanic Violente or just, fucking Destroya, but if you ignore those three, he's amazing. And top of that, he has great health. 5,100 health. Like, and even then, if you really want to scare someone off and just give yourself, like, space, use your tail beam with the back beams to just make sure they stay away. To give yourself that extra time to, like, regen. That and just back beams and tail beam is something that just pisses off and scares every flyer at the same time. Like, almost every flyer. Because just that, if they decide to go for the back beams, they're going to hit with back beams and tail whip, instant 2,000 damage. That's going to hurt even if you're Destroyer, in my opinion. Or if you decide to avoid it, well, guess what, buddy? He has a tail beam, which means that he can either damage you regardless, or you're going to be forced to go even farther away and give him time to regenerate with his insane regen. And top down, his atomic breath, it's insane. Just insane. I would say, I believe the beam alone, I believe in, the flame itself is 2,300 damage or something like that, or very close. And the beam part of it is, 2,200 damage, which is, 4,500 damage in total. In most cases, you're not going to land it, but, large targets like Volcanic Biollante, or at least, enemies that are tall, a lot of characters like Final Wars, Frostbite, a lot of tall kaiju like you, they're going to at least get hit by some of that, and they're going to get beamed. They're going to take a lot of beam damage, and by the time they get to you in melee range, oh, guess what, buddy? Back beams and tail whip. Oh! He's just insanely powerful. It's stupid. The only downside, I would say, is he's slow. And for Atomic Breath, it does take a long time to get to the beam part that you can aim, but apart from that, I don't think that's too severe. I would say the cherry on top, I'm trying to think if there's any... Oh, there it is. He is great at aquatic combat. Do not chase a Shin Gojira in the water unless he's, really, really close to death. Because Shin is scary in the water. Even if you're just, something like Destroyer, be careful if you decide to chase this thing into the water. And if it knows what it's doing. It will mess you up. It's just Shin's a beast. Alright, and then we have the best of S tier. Burning Godzilla. Basically, Heisei Godzilla, but just cracked out. 4,700 health. Same situation where 2-second cooldown for melee. It does cost 15 charge, but that's still stupid cheap. And his tail whip does 853 damage. In terms of a single melee by itself, that's the best in the game. Best melee in the game. You can't tell me otherwise. It's more than Shin's, but it's on a shorter cooldown. I'm pretty sure almost half. That is stupid. And since it has a similar hitbox to Heisei, you can range people with that much damage. He also has great health regen. Not insane, but it's pretty good health regen. And let me also think here. Oh, his spiral ray does 2,300 damage. Significantly more than Heisei's atomic breath. The difference is, he doesn't have to wait 8... And if you could argue Heisei has Spiral Ray, or... Yeah, you get the idea. Heat Ray, Spiral Ray. Point being, Heisei, if he uses it, he has to wait 8 seconds. Burning, he has to wait maybe 3 or so seconds between his, beams. So yeah. Point being, Heisei is just... yeah, sure, Heisei. Heisei at the bottom of his tier. Burning, best kaiju in S tier. Your pulse is crap in most scenarios, but who gives a damn? Who honestly gives a single damn when you have such an OP melee and such an OP beam that you can spam? And he also, I will say, to an extent, he suffers a weakness similar to Heisei, flyers, but because you have more health and your beam is a lot more lethal and it can still be spammed just like Heisei's atomic breath, your beam's damage output should be enough to scare a flyer, unless it's Monster Zero. And if it's Monster Zero, then yeah, that's honestly probably your worst matchup, apart from the one kaiju in S plus tier that everyone's waiting for and no one's gonna be surprised about. But your damage is terrifying for most flyers. That's terrifying damage. Hell, your melee power. I'm going back to tail whip. 853 damage, 2-second cooldown, range. That's enough to scare a Shin. That's enough to scare a Thermo. you can scare thermos in terms of melee if they're if they're aware of what you can do. Well, they're gonna respect that because they know that you're a melee monster just like they are. Both of these two. And there's meltdown, which is mostly useless. Basically how it works is if you activate it while you have a third or of your health or less, your health is gonna rapidly, go down until you die. But your damage is increased by like 65%, but like it's pretty bad because if you don't activate it, you have a chance of landing 2 hits. But if you activate it, sure, you have extra damage, but you're probably going to only land 1 hit because your health is draining. So, I mean, if you can make it okay, since this is a max level skilled player scenario, let's say if you somehow manage to make it work in very specific conditions, okay, it's pretty lethal, but it's very situational. Like, you're not going to have many chances to properly use it. But you honestly don't need to use it because everything else about your kaiju, apart from your pulse, is outstanding. You're literally just a jacked out Heisei. Then the last kaiju on the list that no one is surprised is the only kaiju in S+ tier, Destroyer. Okay, let's see here. Where do I begin? I honestly don't care about this, but because everyone knows Destroyer is blatantly overpowered. 7,500 base health, so that's already insane. Makes him a insane tank kaiju. Has very good DPS. If you know the right combo, your melee DPS can be fairly quick and not insanely quick, but fairly quick and efficient, especially for the raw numbers it does. Your melees, although expensive, can be balanced out with enough charge points. Like, Tail Whip does 680, and Variable Slicer does 750. And, your Oxygen Destroyer does 2,500 damage in 6.5 seconds. Which is the equivalent of 384 damage per second with your Oxygen Destroyer. Then even if you're, like, on the verge of dying, Chest Beam. Just Chest Beam. Literally Chest Beam. Which, sure, takes out a third of your health, but it's a third of your remaining health. So you could be at like 300 health and you lose like only 100 health. And plus, Oxygen Destroyer does 2,400 damage, but like in a shorter duration. Destroyer is just stupid. And to top this off, he has like, I think it's like 3rd best regen in the game in like raw numbers. Combine this with his insane health, he can just heal and heal and heal between fights. Like, unless a Destroyer gets dogpiled, mind you, teaming over 3 is not allowed, so good luck with that. A Destroyer has a chance of barely ever dying, or just not dying at all in a single play session. Which is mind-boggling, actually. Now, you could say that there was the nerfs like 2 or so weeks ago. I will point this out. Since this is a skilled player's case scenario, Variable Slicer nerf doesn't matter if you're a skilled Destroyer player. And I'm not saying destroy a main, because if you main this character, you're not skilled. Simple as that. If you are the very, very, very rare skilled player that is willing to use Destroy against other Destroyers, like that, like the chances of running to a skilled player using Destroy is about as rare as a blue moon. But the main point is, if you're skilled, the Variable Slicer doesn't matter, because you'll know the range is still really good. It can still effectively range. It's just not retarded anymore. It's just that simple. Tail Whip range is also insane. Like, it is. Like, it's great. So you really have nothing to complain about. And sure, you lost 450 base health. Go cry me a river. Because Tail Whip was made quicker. So, for the average Destroyer main, yeah, it's a pretty bad nerf. But if you're a skilled player who occasionally uses Destroya, again, skilled player using this brain dead atrocity, I would say you're slightly stronger than before. Because I'll say this now. I know I said a Gigan perfectly counters a brain dead Destroya if it's a skilled Gigan, but I will say this. A skilled Destroya cannot be countered. A Gigan will last long, but the fight will just last ages. The Destroya is not gonna... Destroya needs a combination of being skilled and having a good build. And then, well, if that's the case, there's no countering it. That's about it. But overall, I think that just about sums it up. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I was honestly kind of nervous about doing it at first, but the more I did it, the more I went along, the more I felt confident about it. And I'm actually glad I got to do this, because I'm a big fan of tier lists. Like, I was very happy to help Nerdius with his tier list, but I'm even more glad I got to do my own. And I'm super glad for those who watched it. So thank you.